Hey, welcome to God's Glory and Men's Real Stories. I'm excited that you would join us today for another great episode. And to all those listening for the first time, thank you for joining us. I want you to know that your story and what you may be going through, they matter here, and you're not alone. So don't worry about what chapter you're in because God's still writing your story. So sit back with a community that cares about you and hopes that you feel God's love as well as see God's glory in Men's Real Stories. So today's special guest is a brother who's in the business of helping men take control and find freedom from a sin many of us wrestle hard with, and that's pornography. He leads a proven program that produces healing and growth and a path to sexual integrity. So I'm excited to welcome our brother, Wailer Giles, to the episode. What's going on, bro?
Hey, buddy. Thanks so much for letting me hang with you here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, this space is a safe space for all of us, man. And it's exciting to be able to sit down with somebody that I have sat with, I have shared meals with, and excited to be able to do an episode with you today and allow you to share what you shared with me on multiple occasions with my audience, because I truly believe that it's truly going to do just what you do, which is allow people to see and look past certain things or realize that there is how would I say it? There is help out there. There is an opportunity for you to get past some of the things that you have maybe just struggled with and something that many of us struggle with. So before we even get started, man, like, introduce yourself. I'm gonna let you introduce yourself just to my audience. So they're like, well, who is this guy?
Who is this guy? What is he even doing here?
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to tell you straight up, before I tell him who I am, I got to let everybody know I'm already jealous of you. You don't even know. Yeah. I mean, it's a thing I've been nursing since childhood. Seriously. Anytime
What's that?
from grade school, I was always jealous of the boys that had a Roman numeral in their name.
Oh, okay.
Always.
Okay.
See, you got that 3, you know.
I do.
I always envied the kids because I'm just like, they must be royalty. They got that Roman numeral in their name. I'm an adult. And I'm still jealous.
Look, the funny thing about it is everybody asked me if I was going to name my son the 4th. And I thought it was a little crazy because I didn't think I was royalty. I was like, I'm no prince or royalty. This is not like I'm the King of Wales. So why would I name him the 4th? Like, why would I keep that going? Like, I feel like there should be a hard stop at 3.
Okay.
But, you know.
We got past the junior. We established the 3rd. We're getting out of this Roman numeral business.
Yeah, you cut it at that point. At least that's how I feel. But there are 4ths out here that I will not try to, like, take away what they meant to their lineage.
Yeah. I mean, if I ever met a 7th, I would just kneel, like, right away. Like, you must be Austrian. I don't know what it is, but genuflect. Yeah, no, in my family line. So my legal name, if somebody wants to Google me, make sure I'm not a registered creep of some time, it's Chad Thomas Giles. My nickname is Wailer. That's what everybody calls me. And on our side, from my great grandfather down to my son, nobody was bold enough to start a junior. And so instead, we passed down the middle name Thomas. And so my great grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, me, and my firstborn son, we've got Thomas in the middle name. That's as close as we get to Roman numeral factor in our tree.
Okay. So you all have something in common there.
Yeah. You know, I will say, so kind of like you, I tried to break the streak when we had the firstborn. We knew we wanted to name him Sage. So we had that unlocked. But the middle name factor, I was just like, you know what I want on his birth certificate? I want Sage the Dragon Slayer Giles. And I mean, with the definite article, not Sage Dragon Slayer, Sage the Dragon Slayer Giles. And I campaigned hard for that. You know, my wife and I were usually synced up, but when it came to that middle name, she was just like, she was not there with it, but I was determined. And then she pulled a fast judo move on me. She's like, middle name Giles. You have to do middle name Giles, or middle name Thomas. You got to do middle name Giles. I was like, she got me.
She got me. She
won
over me.
I lost the Dragon Slayer. And you know, I'll tell you what, my boy, he was like, I don't know, he was like 10 or so when we broke the news to him. It was like, you know, your middle name was almost the Dragon Slayer. He looked right at his mother. He was like betrayed. He was like, I could have had the Dragon Slayer as my middle name. You gave me Thomas.
Wait, he wanted that?
Oh, he wanted it hard. He still wants it. He's 17 now, and I think he's still a little butthurt about it.
I'm sitting here thinking like you're gonna have to go to school with him with that middle name. You know that, right? Like you're gonna have to show up like with almost like a sword every day.
You get branded as a fifth grader with that. You don't need anything else in life. What are you talking about? He could see somebody 20 years later. They'd be like, I forget his first name, but I remember that middle name.
Yeah. How could we forget it? The Dragon Slayer. Up here comes the Dragon Slayer. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
He's got the red hair for it.
So how many boys do you have?
So we got 6 kids all together, 3 boys, 3 girls. We have balance to the force.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. 6. Wow. Whew.
Okay. She wouldn't keep her hands off me. I was behaving myself.
Here we are.
Here we go.
Were you though? 6 kids
you
later.
You said it's a safe space, so that was something I need to get off my chest. Everybody thinks it was my fault, but
yeah. Hey man,
do what she tells me.
I'm glad that you could finally just say that, because you're right. We were thinking like, man, did you do anything else? Did you have a job or anything?
We went on 6 vacations. That's what happened,
Got it. So I'm guessing the vacations have stopped now.
Oh yeah, she cut me off hard. She said no more.
Okay. Hey, I think you got enough. That's awesome. So
I thought we'd be a 12-kid family, tell you true, but then
are you serious?
I really did, and we both did. We both got married. Just it was a little idealistic, but we thought, yeah, we're just gonna catch as many as come. And then like it started fast. I mean, fast. We were by our first anniversary, Sage was a month old already. And so there wasn't much lag time between married and then, I guess we're expecting a baby now. It started off pretty right away. Right. We had the first 4 kids like pop, 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 pop. I mean, we had 3 under 3, and then we had 4 and under. So they were real tight together. And then there's a 3-year gap. And the last 2, she never had any scary deliveries, but the pregnancies cost her a lot more in her body. And there was concerns with Rook and Jade in the last 2. And so we kind of backed up and reassessed. And we're like, okay, maybe this is the size of the garden we're supposed to tend. And
sure,
her health matters a lot. I don't get in with the like you can trust God in a way that's a little too cavalier. And so it's like if it looks hazardous, it's like let's back up and make space here. So that's how that went down.
No, I totally understand that. I'm excited to really unpack a little bit of your story today, as I've heard a little bit. And more importantly, I'm excited about, as I said, what you do that provides a lot of value in men's lives, because we both, in a way, are called into men's lives. We both have our own ministries that are a part of ministries that allow men to see themselves past how they've always seen themselves. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's a good summary. Yeah, so I'm the director of outreach with Proven Ministries. I've been with them for about 18 months or so in a full-time capacity. I was buddies with all these guys for several years before anybody ever imagined I was going to be working here. Nobody was more surprised about that than me. When that happened, that was not one I saw coming. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the sad thing is, we're going to do the work. It's needful. But there are definitely days where I wished that the ministry was like outward facing. Like we were contending with the secular side of the world and, going after the ones that are targeting kids and like, fighting the empire of pornography and doing what we can cut to, like eliminate the profits. The thing of it is, all of our work is in the context of the church because it's so prevalent and pervasive. Statistically, there's hardly any distinction between men outside the church and men inside the church in how much they contend with pornography. And the same is true with women. The stats with women have gotten almost identical to men's engagement now.
Oh, wow.
And so the thing that's really demoralizing about it is every man that I talk to, every single one of them encountered pornography at just a stupid early age, most of the time before puberty set in. And they didn't go looking for it. Somebody either shoved it in their face or they discovered it by accident. And from that moment on, they've been struggling and they get usually deep into adulthood before they discover there's a way out. And so when you talk about helping reshape the way they imagine their own identity, they walk around thinking that pornography is their forever story. And they actually can't imagine a life without that struggle defining every 5 minutes of their day. It's all consuming. Once that dragon burrows in and sets up shop inside their spirit, there's nothing it doesn't touch. And so even if it's not a sexual relationship, the backdrop is just always colored by how many thousands of hours they've presented their body to the worst kind of media. And it makes it so that you can't even be fully present. It could be like the chillest spot at home with your family, and a lot of you is somewhere else because that's how you've been trained to go.
Sheesh. Wow. And the way you just painted that picture, it was so real, because I have been that guy before, where what you just said at the end, where like you're sitting there with family and your mind is somewhere else, like, man, I wonder how long this movie's gonna be before I can go back up to my own space. Or like, I mean, yeah, that's so real. And you said that it gets to most men before they reach puberty, and I feel like, has that increased since like the time of like just internet being prevalent, or has that always been the case?
Oh yeah, of course. The ubiquity of the internet is, I mean, there was definitely a big uptick once high-speed internet became a thing. At first, the first people that developed any kind of a pornography addiction were the guys that worked in the tech industry, because they were the first ones to have high-speed internet. And so,
Yeah.
they're doing their job, and then there's a side tap over here where they're doing everything else. And then once it became available to other people, well, then shoot, it's in everybody's office space or bedroom at that point. The part that has made it almost incomprehensibly terrifying now is that, you know, everybody's carrying a God machine around in their pockets, which means they're effectively carrying a harem in their pants. And you've got kids carrying that same tech. So the average age years ago was somewhere north of 12, right? Now, the data's a little slow, because you understand they're never like talking to 10-year-olds being like, have you seen pornography yet? And so it'll be years later when a teenager and adult is saying, how old they were when they first experienced it. But if you listen to Christian counselors, or not even Christian counselors, just counselors that are engaged in the work of really hard scenarios with kids, they anticipate, they estimate that the average age nowadays is actually 8 when a child first sees hardcore pornography. And there's plenty of stuff that passes on like so-called family television that is effectively porn. I don't care if they're under sheets, you're watching two people have sex. If you did that at your neighbor's window, it would be categorically illegal. You have to get processed, but you put it on a screen and suddenly it's all right. That's pornography. That's the devil's iconography. And you got kids carrying this media around in their pockets, and they don't even have the constitution to know what they're engaging. Their nervous system is wired to want it. God made us to be magnetized to that in the right context. It's a beautiful gift, but it's been sullied and hijacked and put in the worst possible place, so that it will be years of a child's life before they begin to have the chance to know what happened to them then. And then they're just kind of stuck in it. And most of the time, they, like we said earlier, they can't imagine a way out. They don't know there's ministries like ours. Most of their churches don't have any kind of program in place to help them. And the vast majority of the churches are just absolutely silent on the problem in the first place, which is crazy, because I think it's the single worst problem besetting God's people. And tragically, it's the single least addressed.
Yeah. No. And because it's not addressed, as you were saying, I feel like we go on believing that it's not that bad. It's not that serious. I don't see it hurting anybody. I'm not bothering anybody. Um, um, we make up all the things that allow the shame that's kind of building up to ease it. But because nobody's saying anything about it, it's like nobody's even addressing it. It's not that serious. It's not like I went out here and petition a woman for it. I'm just watching because they created it. And if they created it, I'm supposed to watch it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so we come up with all these reasons on why it's okay, why nobody sees it. It's crazy because before this episode started, I thought about kind of what we may hit on today. And I realized that my story, when it came to pornography, a large part of my story of the wrestles that I had with it, and honestly, I wouldn't even look at it as I was wrestling with it. I was just engaging in it. I didn't wrestle with it. I didn't see it as a problem.
Yeah.
But a lot of it took place in this studio. A lot of it took place in an area of my house where nobody bothered me. Nobody came to. And it's crazy to realize that in this same exact studio, God had a plan for this all along, and it wasn't that. And he took something, as I love to say sometimes, he took something that was ugly. He took something that was a dark place, something where I self-soothed, and I found myself just diving into things that I had no business being into. He took an area and he turned it for his good, for my good and his glory, to use it in a way that he always knew it was written to be used. And it's just wild because you're right. There was nobody ever contesting what I was doing. And I think for a lot of men, even if nobody's contesting it, we're hiding it anyway because we feel the shame of it. Like, it's not like we're regularly walking around like, hey, look, yeah, I'm going to go check out this video on whatever hub later on. I'm going to. No, that's nothing we talk about, but yet we don't have a problem with running to it. And we'll make jokes about it. Well, got a date with a laptop tonight or something crazy. But yet it's fully in control of us. Almost similar to, like, I would look at it, my phone, where I was talking about it in an episode, how like that phone has a lot of control over us, even if it's not pornography. But the fact that our phones and our computers call to us or almost have like a timer in our head, like, hey, when was the last time you came up, visited me? When was the last time, like, hey, look, I tell people, even though I have been set free from that, I don't overlook the times when I'm home alone and my laptop's like, nobody will even know. It's just like old times. Crack it open. See what it would be like again. And that's a struggle that doesn't go away. So how with your ministry, with Proven Men Ministry, how do you guys tackle that idea of, like, what am I doing wrong? Why is this wrong? How is it hurting what I have going on?
Sure. Yeah, well, thing one, going back a couple paces, it's big of you to step into as much of your story as you did there. That's brave and not common. So I just want to commend you for doing that in this space. When it comes to the fallout, the injury that happens to people when they're engaged with pornography and unwanted sexual behaviors, it is absolutely not an insulated set of sins. It's not a victimless crime. The most harrowing thing that I can say to get a fella's attention, because a lot of times they do coddle it. I mean, there was one pastor, he was funny. He went through our workbook study, and when he was telling me what it was like going through the process, he was like, man, I got to be honest with you. I wasn't struggling with sin. I was snuggling with sin. I was like, put that in my pocket,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like, that's how it is with so many guys. They're not struggling. They might even be in an accountability group where they talk to their buddies like, yeah, I had a setback this week. They pray for each other. They confess their sins. And then they rinse and repeat for X amount of years where that's all they ever do is confess, pray. And I think they conflate that with repentance. That is not repentance. Repentance in the Hebrew literally means an about face. It's a 180-degree spin.
Yeah.
And so if you were traveling this direction, bop, turn around, now you've repented. If all you're doing is confessing, so I think there's kind of a, I want to maintain my Christian street cred. And so when I confess, I'm vulnerable and I'm being contrite and I'm telling people how guilty I am, but there's nothing that's penetrated to the heart level if you haven't done anything about it. And it's not to say that it's going to be easy, but until you've taken action and rededicated your body to God, it's just lip service. It's just it's serving two masters. You can't have one hand on the plow and the other hand on yourself and expect to get any of God's work done. It just doesn't play. And there's so much in scripture dedicated to how disastrous sexual immorality is. It's not a matter of Christian or Jewish prudishness. We didn't decide that people shouldn't have fun and so only have sex with one woman or one man. It's like, no, we can measure. It's patently observable how badly everything goes once you step outside of celibacy or monogamy. I mean, they can show that the healthiest kids, without exception, are the kids that have a mom and a dad in the same household. And for years, like weird stuff too. Like, why is it that kids that have a father figure in the home, why would they have better balance? It was a thing that frustrated researchers for a long time. They're like, well, maybe they're doing more athletic stuff, but then they would be like, well, if we affect for that and the data, it's like these single mom households, the kids are still in sports. What's the deal? They're athletic, but they're not as balanced. And then some savvy guy was like, he just looked at the way that dads play with their kids. Moms play with their kids. Dads have a peculiar way of playing with their kids where, I mean, you know how it is. Like we want to break the rules. We kind of want to freak mom out a little bit. And so if you got 8-foot ceilings in the house, you want to see if you can bump the kid up against the ceiling before you catch him. Just like, let's not get the fan blades, but like everything is like, how many flips can we do before he lands on the bed?
For sure.
Everything is rough. And all of that stuff is developing the kid's inner ear in ways that nobody is like measuring in real time. But that flipping around and rough and tumble with dad is developing the inner ear of the kid so that they have a greater sense of like spatial awareness and how that affects their balance moving through the world. So dads just being dads when they're home with the kids makes the kid more capable of walking through a hazardous world. When you don't have that, kids start losing something. And I know there's all kinds of scenarios where you've got a single parent doing the best they can. God bless them. Yeah. But that's not the ideal. That was never the design.
No.
And so when you're talking about, you mentioned a thing minutes ago, like, I didn't go out and petition a real woman. So, my lady, there's no threat of me bringing STDs home to her or anything. Like nobody's going to affect me through the screen. But then again, whenever we orgasm, we bond immediately with the thing that brought us to that point.
Sheesh.
And so you think about these guys that have who knows how many women they've fixated on across the screen. It is as if they have slept with them. As far as their brain is concerned, as far as their nervous system goes, their body doesn't know any difference because they still orgasmed in her direction. And that represents quite a lot of robbery from their wife. Our spouses should own the exclusive monopoly on all of our orgasms, all of our intimacy. And so we go to the master's words, right? Yeshua said, if you've so much as looked at a woman with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they're like, well, he's being hyperbolic. He's just trying to make a point. It's like, we can prove it on a physiological level.
Yeah.
That's what has happened. Your brain doesn't know the difference. If you've squeezed one in that direction, it is as if you went, and that's the thing. Like, I think the master is also communicating that point. If you are looking with that intent, for most men, the only thing stopping them from actually sleeping with her is opportunity.
For sure.
You know?
And whether we think we have the opportunity or not, it's a thought process of, I got the next best thing if I never engage with her, if I never say anything.
Yep.
But okay. So to take it even a step further, and this comes from a conversation I've had with a brother of mine, it didn't seem to be a problem in his relationship until he found himself not as attracted to his wife.
Yep.
And he was having trouble seeing her the way he saw her initially.
Yep.
And I remember me and him having a conversation, and I was like, I knew that he had been struggling with porn, and we were holding each other accountable, praying that we continue to allow God to open our eyes to see women the way he sees his daughters, and allow us to get past the lustful way that we see women. And so that's something that we have encouraged each other on. But I recognize that when you slip back into that, a lot of times we begin to blame the level of, like, the lack of intimacy with our wives, with our significant other. We blame it on things like our job. We blame it on stress. We blame it on just everything we're dealing with. But in order to put out that stressful fire, to put out all the things that we're carrying, we'll put it out as if by running to porn.
Yeah.
And then we'll say, I can't be here the same way for you because I'm going through so much.
Yeah.
And whether we recognize that's untrue or we truly believe, like, no, it's just the stress of work. I recognize it's stealing, as you said, from the union that we were supposed to be only, the union that was created only for our sexual encounters. And so I recognize that nobody's safe from this. It's a matter of, like, how do I get free from this? Because nobody's safe. A lot of people think, well, if I were closer to God, maybe if I was a pastor, or if I was I wouldn't have to deal with this type of stuff. And I'm like, I know you believe that, like, pastors don't struggle with this, but I appreciate pastors like people like Tim Ross and them who are able to come out and say, I was preaching on Sunday and then going home and watching porn on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And that puts things into perspective, like, well, sheesh, if he's struggling, then, like, how is there any hope for me?
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the data points that really disturbs me. If you ever poll pastors anonymously, it's the only time you get the data, because they got to protect their reputation. They're really, they have the same shame cycle as everybody else, compounded by fear for the congregation, fear for their livelihood. So it's a real mess when they're stuck in that tailspin. If you survey pastors anonymously, it never comes back any less than 50% of them admitting to an ongoing struggle with pornography and unwanted sexual behaviors. Imagine that in an early church context. If half of the apostles, the bishops, the shepherds, the evangelists, if half of the early community leadership was visiting temple prostitutes, we wouldn't be here today. We just plain wouldn't exist. There would never have been any us that had a chance of coming into being, because they would never have shook the world like they did. They would have been just like the world. And that's the thing that's happening to us right now. There's hardly any distinction between the behavior of men and women in the church and those outside when it comes to their engagement with pornography. And so to address it, most of the issue just comes down to having something like a training regimen. It's once you remove the insulation and the illusion that it's okay so long as I don't get caught, right? And that's the thing. Like, a lot of them, when they connect with us, it's because work found out, their wife found out, something like that, and then they're just trying to keep the house from burning down.
Ooh,
there are some that have a tender conscience and finally are desperate, and they reach out. What happens really, if you have a curriculum and you have community, if those two things are in tandem, transformation is almost guaranteed to occur. And I personally know guys that didn't even have a sexual integrity curriculum, but they found themselves radically devoted to the spiritual disciplines. In one case, I know a man that just started memorizing a metric ton of scripture. Like, he was working through entire books of the Bible. He was struggling with pornography hard. When he goes into this scripture memory protocol, he wasn't even trying to get away from the porn stuff. Like, he hadn't really repented of that. But once he's got his face in the book and he's memorizing the scripture, he accidentally got away from pornography, which makes a lot of sense because the Bible effectively rewrites our spiritual genome. And if you're memorizing scripture, it's nigh impossible to have any bandwidth left for that stuff. There's just no room for it. You're consumed with all the right stuff.
Yeah. It's almost like you're reprogramming your thought process with truth.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing. And, fasting is another big one. Most people have some rhythm of spiritual disciplines in their life. They go to church. There's going to be some level of reading the Bible and praying. They'll have worship somewhere in there. The ones that people don't generally have a steady diet of is, solitude, silence, stillness, that continuum. They're best together, of course. Fasting, not generally regular in our circles. Giving kind of depends what tradition you're in and how you were brought up. But if a fella fasts and memorizes scripture, it's going to be real hard for him to stay connected to pornography. The scripture memory is rewiring his mind and tethering his spirit in all the right ways. And the fasting is making him conversant with a whole lot of no. Right. Even if you do a short fast, it doesn't got to be something crazy long. Right. And, obviously, if there's medical problems, check with your healthcare, your expert, all that.
Good call.
Yeah. Don't want anybody to be like, oh,
like, he told me.
Yeah, right. You get some nasty emails once this thing goes up,
Right.
Did he tell them to starve themselves?
Right.
But, yeah. And at that point, it is adaptable. Like, whatever your body is capable of doing, that's the point of discipline. Right. And so, like, if you can handle an intense long fast, there's a lot to be gained from it, but, be responsible with it. And when you do that, you find the freedom of no. We're such a saturated society with, instant purchases. If I don't get it tomorrow, it's taken too long. I want to stream this thing right now. I can carry, the gamut of the world's media in my pocket. So anywhere I go, I can always pull up the movie. And it's just like, we have so many yeses. We're frustrated with the prevalence of opportunity, and people don't even know how to be satisfied and quiet anymore. You take somebody's devices away, put them in a room with nothing to do, most people will go crazy, which means they're a stranger to themselves. They're not even at home in their own body.
Yeah, because you're right. I mean, like it's almost like I might as well shut down until I can get my device, but I might as well go to sleep. There's nothing else
get
I
that
can
input.
do.
Yep. Yeah. And when you fast, at first, of course, it's frustrating because it's unpleasant, but it's so liberating when you cross the threshold of the ghrelin hormone, when it sends the signal of being hungry. You don't get hangry anymore. You're not like a toddler that can't get past 11:15 without a juice box and a snack. Instead, you just hear the signal. It's like, yeah, I recognize that signal. I know what that means. But your belly doesn't govern you anymore. You govern the belly.
Right.
Incidentally, there's quite a lot of connectivity between not being governed by your belly and not being governed by your loins. And so you can see somebody attractive. There's no sin in noticing that somebody is beautiful.
Right.
It's when you choose to study the beauty and start to fantasize, that's when it becomes a problem. Like King David, he sees Bathsheba the one time, no fault. It's that second look that he takes. You know, and I had the good fortune of I think I was like 12 years old when my dad taught me that lesson. And so really lucky growing up in the household I did. And that second look instruction. It's like first look, you can't help that. You're gonna see. And there's nothing indiscreet. There's nothing wrong with somebody being beautiful and with you noticing their beauty. Once you start to dwell on it and you start to take it places and do that thing where it's like, like something happened to my lady, I mean, maybe she will notice, like crazy places the guys go,
So everybody thinks that way, because that was weird, but yeah, no, I've been there before. That's creepy. I thought it was just me.
Oh man. Yeah, I'll try to tell myself things like if I find myself in one of those moments, I'm just like come on, bud, you're at a coffee shop, she's a barista, she's not interested in you. It's like it's her job to try to get you to come back. She needs you to put a tip in the jar. She's not interested in you.
No,
but like,
so true.
Anything that's just like minimally flirtatious, it's enough to like, it's like opportunity. Like, and we are to some extent wired in that way. And I remember there was one time, I mean, I guess I'm supposed to get real with you on this platform. It was several months ago, it might have been over a year ago now, but I remember one of those interactions, as a barista, witty, asking me stuff. And I didn't step over the line of like overtly flirting with her, but I liked the attention a lot. And that bugged me for so long. It was like 2 weeks. Like I started to crush on her. And it had been years since something like that crept into my spirit. Here I am working at a sexual integrity ministry. And like, I didn't even want that feeling. There was nothing illicit in our interaction. And this infatuation starts to creep into me. Fortunately, I had the practice of no. I was conversant with telling myself no. But dude, it was like at least 2 weeks of just no a bunch of times. I saw her one time over the counter and I had to dog myself with a whole lot of no. And I wanted to stay with my wife. I didn't want to do anything to endanger that. I didn't want a side chick. I didn't want to like have some stupid, let's text and send pics or whatever. I didn't want any of that. And that stuff still came at me.
For sure.
And there's a level where that wasn't my fault. But if I let it go, like at that point, I'm complicit with it.
For sure.
And so I didn't let myself go back to that coffee shop for a long time. It was probably months until a different ministry colleague set up an appointment. And I wasn't going to be like, dude, there's this girl I can't see. I can't go back there.
Look, so that coffee's no good there.
Yeah.
No, I know they don't make good coffee there. Go somewhere else.
Everybody calls that place Bitter Roast. You didn't know that? It's just like, yeah, you can't go there. Oh, grinds in it and everything.
Okay. And you know what? What you're saying though, as funny as it is, it's so true. Man. And it's funny how I'm normally quick to be like, devil, get behind me, not today. As if he's just dropping little people out here in my way sometimes. And I recognize that it's less of what's happening in front of me and more about how I'm reacting to it. Like you said, it's the oh, okay. Not today. Nope. Because you're right. It's almost like that second look comes along with the you start to screenwrite a story. Like, I mean, literally, you start to. The second look is the screenwrite. It's like the first look wasn't enough. I got to look to make sure I didn't like it. Oh my goodness. Oh man, why am I here now? And so I know exactly what you're saying, because that I like to believe when God broke me and put me back together with the pieces of me that I didn't want anymore, the pieces of me that the lust and all that was a part of me. I like to believe that he took away that piece of lust and said, "Dope, you'll never have to deal with this again."
Mm-hmm.
And I recognize that that is a daily choice.
Mm-hmm.
Every day I wake up and I'm presented with opportunities to live in a life that I had no problem living before. I had no shame. I even let comedians fuel my thing of like, yeah, see, they know what time it is. I mean, they make jokes about like pornography and different things. So it's a man's thing to do.
Oh man. Yeah.
And I realized that when you have enough people making it seem like it's just a man's thing to do, it's a part of man. It's like, yo, this is just what men do. Like, this is just who we are. We're primitive. We're supposed to look. We're supposed to we're programmed to be that way. Those lies begin to back up and cover up the shame we feel for even doing it. And
let's kill that file dead.
Okay.
I think I got distracted earlier, but that wavelength you're on right there, I want to make sure we don't miss that again.
Okay.
It's a thing. I never enjoy saying this to a guy, but they need to know. They need to know how bad it is. It's like if you hear the average age of kids being exposed, that should get your attention. Like, it's pretty busted. There's a good chance the kids in their household are contending with pornography, and it's just kind of assumed in the culture. But the part that should just like kill it dead the instant you hear it, if you are involved in the economy of pornography to any extent whatsoever, even if it's so-called free content, well, the free stuff, they're still tracking your data. They're using that to sell ads, which is generating profits, which is increasing the empire. And directly downstream from that is child sex trafficking. The pornography industry is the single greatest, almost monopoly level fuel to global child sex trafficking. And so if a Christian man wants to spend his time like that, anytime he's logging in or downloading something, liking something, OnlyFans, whatever he's into, he is directly contributing to countless innocents being injured and devastated in the worst possible ways. That should be the last thing a man needs to hear, to be like, whatever it takes, I'm getting out. It's really bad. There's stuff I wish I didn't have to know, but the kind of unconscionable ugly, like, you could have left me in a room for a year and given me one homework assignment, go write a villain story. And after a year, I would never have come up with some of the stuff I've heard from the guys that talk to me. It's truly horrifying. It will break you in half. And there's a dark side of the world that you don't ever get to come back from once you look into that abyss. The work that we do, we have to traffic in that abyss often enough because that's where a lot of the kingdom's been captured. So that's where I want men in the church to be arrested in their attention. It's like, I'll make a concession. If what you need is to masturbate, that's not ideal. You should stop doing that as well. But I'll give him a halfway house. If what you need to do is scratch that itch, you got other means to do it that don't require pornography. You have to stop pornography. You have to stop. It's the most insidious thing in the world, fueling the ugliest things beyond, they should be beyond the scope of human imagination. And instead they're commonplace. And it's globally industrial in scale. And to think that this is commonplace in covenant keeping people, it's staggering that this is the status quo. And if we continue in this way, God bless. I don't think there's going to be anything left to identify us as God's people anymore. So, not to, I don't enjoy interrupting your flow, but that was one I didn't want to get away from us.
That was real, and we need to see or hear that dark side to things, because if nothing else, sometimes our conscience will say, I'm not hurting anybody. But when you understand who you are hurting in the long run, when you understand what you are fueling, what you are continuing to build, it changes the scope. And when you're forced to listen and hear that, I can't unhear that. I can't act like I didn't hear what you just said, nor can any of the listeners, because it changes the way our mind says, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not even, I'm staying in the house. I'm not even leaving out the house. I'm being a great dad. I'm being a great father or husband. But I just, every once in a while, I just go and, just take, take the edge off with that. And we don't realize what the backside to what we're doing is, outside of hurting our own mental space, hurting our own families, hurting our own relationship, kind of putting a damper on the intimacy we're supposed to have with our significant other. We're doing a lot of damage in an area that we just don't even realize that, I didn't know 1 and 2 played together. I didn't know 1 had anything to do with 2. And it's funny because I never realized that until I had a great conversation with a close friend who goes to my church, who was trafficked. Is that how you say it?
Wow. Yeah.
And she got out of it, but her story that she shares with a lot of people is what most people don't realize. It's the part that you just said, where it's like, what you don't realize is that me getting tricked into a world that I never wanted to be a part of, it only exists because you continue to click. You continue to search. I would, there was a safety at one time where I could leave out of my house and jog and run without worrying about something happening to my life. But because we continue to click, because we continue to search, there are people out here who feel like they have to continue to make sure there's new product. And because that's exactly how they look at it. New product. As if this person's not a human being. And I never forget, after that conversation, as if I wasn't already broke from it, it just changed the way. It's almost like she took a lens that was there to make me not feel bad. She took a lens away to where it was like, I need you to look at that now. I need you to understand it from my point of view. And I've never been able to look at things the same, because and it's not to shame others that are here, because I have brothers who I walk alongside with who struggle with this. And I'm constantly reminding them that they're the righteousness of Christ. And I recognize that this is not just a I give it up. I'm done with it. When I even have a brother who I'm a part of accountability app with him, where he constantly shares his content from his computer and all. But he took that step because he realized that as much as I just wanted to just give it up and just be done with it, I realized that it wasn't as simple for me. There are sometimes steps that I need to take where I need people who are going to hold my hand as I walk through this. I just can't. So I can't help but turn around and go back to say, so how did your story intertwine with all of this? And what like I noticed we're like halfway in the conversation. It's like, so how did you get here in all of this? Like, because normally when people think like, man, if this guy is so passionate about this, what happened to him?
Yeah, it's fair. Most people assume if I've got a job like this, I must have been like deep in that pocket myself. And then got saved, and now I want to help everybody else with it. I had the auspicious privilege of growing up in the household that I did. Both my grandfathers and my dad were just exceedingly virtuous men, and one woman men all the way through. Absolutely adored their women. My grandmothers, my mom, beautiful women, love them famously. As a son, I'm taking more notes from the men, but yeah, just very good family culture, very very God-fearing people, fun, hilarious people as well, very witty. And so I was just lucky being born into the house that I was. I didn't know that I was unusual until I was 21 and I was an RA on the senior dorms at Liberty. And, in that position, there's a lot of late night conversations with the guys, whether it's like a group of dudes out in the quad or fella knocking on the door wanting to be a confidant. All the stories started to sound the same. All these guys bumped into pornography somewhere around 12 years old. They've been struggling ever since. And here they are at Liberty University and, really ashamed. And I was like, huh. I mean, all I knew was how I grew up. I was a straight-laced Southern Baptist kid. And I never got exposed to pornography. Never discovered it on accident. Never had anybody throw it in my face. But I was 21 before I knew that was unusual. When I met the guys here at Proven several years ago, at that point, they had already connected with thousands of men. And they didn't know a single other man that had a story like mine. I was like, huh. They don't say it so much anymore, but the running joke for a while, they used to call me the unicorn. I was like, all right, whatever. But yeah, so we have now a 4-generation family legacy. My grandfathers, my dad, myself, my kids. There's never been any exposure to pornography of any kind. I can look back on some of my younger years and I can see what were close calls that I didn't know were close calls at the time. I mean, probably would have been 10, somewhere around there. Riding my bike through my neighborhood, going to my buddy's house, and come up the sidewalk, get to the edge of the driveway, and there's 5 of my pals looking at a magazine at the hood of his mom's car, on the other side of the driveway. And so I'm like, perch up for a second. They see me, like, hey, come over here. You got to check this out. And like the instant I looked at them, there was something repellent about their faces. I had no idea what they were looking at. But if there was any association between what they were looking at and their faces, I didn't want any part of it. It was like, I think I'm good. And they're like, no, come over here. You got to check this out. I was like, I'm going to ride my bike. I'll see y'all later. Pedaled on out of there. If I had just been at the hood of the car when the magazine got flopped out, no telling what would have happened. Sure. As a 10-year-old, I don't know if... I mean, I remember talking about sexual integrity stuff with my dad beginning at 12. At 10, I don't know if there would have been any defense mechanisms in place. And the natural reaction of a red-blooded boy is to be like, I want to see more of that. That's always what happens.
Right.
And that's not their fault. For the hard things that we've been saying for our time together, and your audience that's listening, I want to be really clear. What happened when you were little was never your fault. It's not fair. It's not just. It's wrong in every way. And I am so sorry that happened to you. I mean, it was one of those late night conversations on the dorm when I was an RA, when one of my closer friends on that floor, he tells me his story, and it was, oh man, like not just pornography, but abuse stuff, and a 5-year-old being sexualized in kindergarten by a classmate that was eerily conversant with how to get down. So you got a kindergarten little girl teaching my buddy how to do things during nap time. Just it's crazy. It's crazy that that's our world. And so he looks at me, and he just, something in the way that he read me, he was like, you don't seem like somebody that struggles with pornography. And so I'm just real curious, like, how did you get out of that? I was like, I was never in it. And he was like, what do you mean you were never in it? You know, his walk around world was the opposite of mine. I thought we all grew up this way. He thought everybody grew up his way. And so, you know, here we are looking at each other across the fence. And man, what a precious guy. He had so much grace in the way that he responded. At first, he broke down crying quite a lot. And I think there was an understandable kind of jealousy. You know, why he's 5 years old. No 5-year-old is soliciting that kind of treatment. Sure. So why did that happen to him? Why didn't any of that stuff happen to me? Why did I have this, you know, this shimmering upbringing insulated from all that stuff? But then he caught his breath and he goes, I can't help but praise the God that preserved you and delivered me. It's like, okay. So for, I think, the vast majority of your people that are listening, what happened when you were little was not your fault. The problem is here we find you in your adult years where you are nonetheless responsible to turn that corner. And by responsibility, all I mean is the ability to respond. Nobody else will ever be able to do that for you. And so now you get to be the adult version of yourself that walks back and catches your child self by the hand, walks through those years together. And to do that with Yeshua, you know, to go back and to find him in that room where all that stuff happened and to reclaim the time, to redeem the future. It's so tenable. We do it all the time. All a person has to do is step across the threshold and commit to the process. And when they do, it works every time. As devastating as all the busted stories are, it's also just really fun and life-giving to see the transformation and the deliverance happen on the other side. I mean, I've talked to guys in their 80s that were just beginning to contend with a 60-plus-year-old addiction. And they do it. They do it. You imagine being in your 80s and just starting to engage, and they walk into lasting freedom. They're in the last chapter of their life, and they walk into a new forever story.
The crazier part is that they're in the last chapter and they want that freedom.
Yes.
At that point in their lives. Like that, that's the part that stuck out to me the most. Like I noticed how there's so many older people that I work with when it comes to like technical stuff. And they're just like, I don't care to learn this stuff. I that's why I got you here. But the fact that a person decides that they want to experience that freedom. Like I didn't have to. There's nothing I have to prove anymore. But I want this freedom. I don't want to leave this earth with this addiction still. That's
exactly
powerful.
that. Then that's how they say it too. They're like, I cannot go meet my Jesus. I cannot go meet my Maker. Still bringing this stuff into the throne room.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, there was those close calls when I was growing up, and a lot of God's grace being preserved from that. Once I was a teenager, and I knew what was what, I didn't have any reason to go looking for it, and I had a lot of reasons to avoid it. And so, truth be told,
so you were aware what it was, but you were aware what it was as a teenager, though.
I would have been maybe 13 or so by the time conceptually I knew what it was. You know, but I was private schooled until 5th grade or 6th grade, and then 7th grade on, I was in public school. You know, locker room setting. It's not like a private school is going to insulate you from that either.
Right.
But, you know,
yeah. Tell me about it.
Yeah. And I don't enjoy crass language, but you know, you hear some middle school boys talking about choking the chicken, and it's just like, why would you do that? You know, like I'm thinking about it literally, and then you know, you see the hand gesture they make, and they're like, that's not how I would choke a chicken if I was ever going to choke a chicken. It's like, it just perplexed me. Eventually you get enough context clues and you're like, oh, and it was repulsive to me, the thought of it. Interestingly, my boys, they would have been probably 12, 13, maybe 13, 14, somewhere in there, when we had been talking about sexual integrity stuff in age appropriate language since they were little. And I would rather have pushed those conversations later. if I had had it my way, I would have preserved their naivety for as long as I possibly could have. I mean, shoot, like, we get to, we're in the green room when I'm like, he's getting ready to step out and go to the altar to get married. I'm like, all right, listen, son, there's some things we got to talk about.
Right. Just want to share
I would have wished,
right.
like, download the Matrix of sexuality, like, right before the wedding, But the thing that pushed my hand was when we moved to a different neighborhood and all those kids had smartphones in their pockets. That's when I knew, like, I have to get there first.
Right.
And so they were younger than I would have preferred. But my metaphor was, if we lived in a totalitarian regime in some oppressive government of a country elsewhere, I mean, depending on the political leanings of your audience, some of them might think we have that already. But like, if there was a place where it was illegal to be a Christian, I would have to teach my kids survival skills for how to be people of faith in a hostile country. I wouldn't be able to just wish the dictatorship away. And I would be a foolish dad if I did not prepare them for that hard reality. Well, in our culture, with all the fatness that we have in luxury of America, pornography is the tyranny of our day. And if I do not give them the survival skills, the defense mechanisms, and also the offensive capabilities of how to resist, if I don't give that to them, their sexual template is going to come from the worst places. And they'll be caught up in the same bear trap as all of their peers. So when they were tweens, somewhere in there, I actually had to teach them about the concept of masturbation. Not because I was excited to, I wanted to preserve that naivety, but I knew that if I didn't, their buddies would.
Sure.
And then there's an allure. When their buddies start talking about this thing that's like really fun and you should check it out. And then they send them links and like, hey, this will get you there. I had to get there first. And when I start to describe it to them, and like, just so we're clear for your audience, I did not demonstrate it for them. There was nothing like that. I'm just describing it to them.
Sure.
I've had some people misunderstand me on that count before.
Important part.
Yeah. Yeah. Very important. Like, yeah, there was no like, all right, boys, nothing like that. When I described it to them, immediately they were just horrified.
Right.
Horrified. To them, it was repulsive. And I think that's the natural reaction. What we have in our culture is common, but it's not normal. And I think the way that my kids have been brought up is actually normative per God's design. Instead, we're so used to what's common, we've confused that for what's normal. So that you've got a bunch of little boys and little girls with a habit of masturbation. By the time they get married, they will have watched at least 1,000 hours of people having sex. And usually the worst displays of sex. So that by the time they go to their honeymoon chamber, how many other people have they been with already? At least in their imagination.
Sure.
And that's corroded all of their imagination as to what the sexual union is supposed to look like and what a gift it is in the right context. Like, I still like that pocket with my wife, like we're not like impoverished because we haven't fooled around with this BDSM side of the culture, like we're not bored because we don't have any pornographic influences on our intimacy. Like, we have it really good together. Pornography has nothing to offer me except for death. That's it. I will start to die the instant I engage with that stuff. It has nothing for me. And my kids are proving that out even more now. They're on the 4th generation of our family legacy. And just cool stories that happen with them. That for them, it's just who they are. They're relaxed in it. But they're old enough now to see the difference so that, one of my boys, Orion, he's at a skate park and, you got teenagers up to 20 somethings doing their thing and they're standing around in a circle between their sets and they start talking about porn. And like a group of boys, everybody's assuming that everybody's into it. Who's your favorite starlet and what fetish are you about? So when they get to Orion, like, this is his turn to contribute to the conversation. he just shrugs. He's like, "Oh, I've never watched porn or jerked off in my life." And they're like, "What?" Start calling bullshit on him. Like, absolutely not. They start razzing him. Like, there's no way. Come on, start dogging him real hard. And he just shrugged. He's like, whatever you think. That's what it is. I've never done it. And then it was lucky. One of the other guys in the circle spoke on his behalf. He's like, actually, no, I believe him. I was 16 before one of my cousins made fun of me for not watching it. And he showed it to me. I've been addicted to it ever since.
Jeez.
So he says that. So now there's a little bit of credibility. So everybody's like, okay, well, like, how is that possible? Like, you've never seen it? Like, how? Like, how does that even? He's like, well, my dad started talking to us about it when we were little. And before he can go on with that sentence, like, you talked to your dad about this stuff? And like, that second part was more unbelievable to them than the first part. And it turned into this really cool display where you've got a bunch of non-Christian guys who were just a minute ago, like a hot second earlier, they're dogging him for not being into porn. And now they're peering into his life with jealous affection. And they see him as the one that's free and has the life worth envying, asking him all kinds of questions like, all right, so so how old were you? Your dad's talking to you about this. Like, he didn't just like throw a book your way or something. Like, no, we were talking. It's like, what were those conversations like? And then it starts going into gospel stuff and how prevalent Jesus is in our household. And then, like, even their mom is involved in that conversation. And he just like bent their minds in half with what's the normal arrangement of our household. My 17-year-old son's sexual integrity was a light in the dark world of his skater buddy friends.
Yeah.
He didn't get dogged for it. They want what he has desperately. I don't know if they're going to turn the corner. I don't know what the evangelism protocol looks like when they're like grinding rails and stuff, but there was that light that they couldn't deny. That's how it's supposed to be. Like, as men, like, man, our sexual integrity should be the greatest weapon we have in our arsenal. Like, that should be the thing that we're using to just wreck shop and cut our way through the ugliness of the world. Instead, you have guys effectively playing for the enemy in the way that they behave.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder the church is anemic the way that it is nowadays. We've got huge churches with lots of attendees. We don't have very many disciples anymore.
Ooh, sheesh. Hard to even come back. That's hard to even follow up with a question or even say a statement. I mean,
did I step out of line there?
No. It was good. It needed to be said. It may offend some people, but even in truth, people can be offended by truth all the time. And I think that a lot of times they will use that truth and say it could be worse.
Yeah.
And I always go back to the fact of you're nursing something. Matter of fact, this was put on my heart a while back ago that I recognize there comes a point where men are just like, God, I wish you would take this. I wish you would just take this. I wish you would take this. I don't want this anymore. And I recognize that men weren't drawn and continue to use porn because it's just easily available. Of course it is, but normally our nervous system, our body, our thoughts, they get pulled into a direction to cope with stuff that we don't want to address by looking at or doing things that will take our mind off of what's really there. So where men say, well, God, I wish you would just take this. God's not trying to take that. He wants to take what's behind that.
Yeah.
He wants you to address what's behind that. Like what has you going to that instead of sitting with that. And I speak from my own story because it was way easier to look at porn or look at women or let women distract me from the hurt that was there. And so instead, like you said earlier, you were talking about how like you can put a person in a room and you take their phone from them and they start to like, because what you've done now is you've locked them in a room with a person that they don't actually want to sit with. And
Yep.
you say, well, what's behind that?
Yeah.
Most people like themselves. Yeah, no. They like the version of themselves they've created on top of the person that's not strong enough to say no to porn, strong enough to say no to addictions. And so it's a lot easier to give me a device, and even if it's not porn, it could be Candy Crush. Let me crush my way away from the hard stuff that has me go into whatever I'm addicted to. Because granted, I don't find a problem with Candy Crush, but if Candy Crush is drowning out your mind and pulling you away from the real problems in life, then listen to me. Candy Crush is just as bad as cocaine. And I know somebody's gonna clip that and be like, "Listen to this guy right here. Listen to this guy right here. This guy just said that Candy Crush is." But I recognize, and I'm not talking to the people who just play it moderately. I'm talking to the people who can't sit on the toilet, can't take a break from life, can't take step away from nothing without like pulling out their phone and just losing themselves in whatever it is.
Dude, I've been in the middle of a faith-based seminar gathering where it's like wall to wall preaching, worship, you're gathered there for a purpose. I've seen people pull out Candy Crush in that setting.
What could you possibly be running from in that setting where you need to pull out candy? How bad could it be that you need to give your mind something else to focus on instead of what could possibly be maybe convicting you right now?
Shoot. Oh, me. Are you familiar with Rumi?
No.
He's an old school Persian poet. I think it was like maybe 1500 somewhere back there. He's got one. I started hearing it right away when you started talking about like God wants what's behind that. He's got a poem. It goes like this. I said, "What about my eyes?" God said, "Keep them on the road." I said, "What about my passion?" God said, "Keep it burning." I said, "What about my heart?" God said, "Tell me what you hold inside it." I said, "Pain and sorrow." God said, "Stay with it. The wound is the place where the light enters you."
Jeez. That's
I still haven't talked to
heavy.
the fellow that just like got bored one day and thought, I kind of feel like ruining my life with my wife. And then went and found this pornography addiction so he could forget who he was and get distracted by everything and be governed by desires beyond his control. I've yet to find the guy that just got bored and went and invented these problems. It's almost always attached to a really deep wound. Dad stuff, mom stuff, friends betrayal stuff, identity with himself, any number of things. Could be a combination of all of it. It's not a get out of jail free card. Like, well, if you're wounded, you're allowed to act out. But it's the case that you're not yourself yet. And as long as you stay on that path, you're never going to be. It's suffocating the potentiality of all that God made for you. And they can't imagine their life without it. That's why they keep going back to it. I've heard some fellas say that, and they won't lead with this, mind you, but once you get into that place of trust, they'll look around and they might be crying real hard when it comes out, and they'll be like, "Listen, I would have committed suicide by now if I didn't have pornography." That's different. That's different than a fella that wants to injure people or doesn't care what the fallout is. He is inadvertently hurting a lot of people, and there is a lot of fallout outside of himself. But getting to that bottommost intention in his heart, it's kind of like what Lewis said all those years ago. A man that goes to a brothel is in search of a good thing. He's just going to the worst possible place to find it. It's that intimacy that they're desperate for. It's good to want that. But as long as that death, as long as that specter hand is allowed to reach inside of them and continue working something not much unlike a demonic possession, as long as that's going on, they're always going to be suffocated in the spirit, and they'll never know the glory of who they were made to be. And they're inches away from it. Just a single breath away from stepping into the best life ever. It will be a fight, but the difference is now they're on the right side of the fight. And that's what we do. You give somebody curriculum, get them plugged into community. It's a fight, but now you got your band of brothers with you. Now you got your arsenal. You're trained. You know what traction feels like on the path. In time, it's not a fight anymore. It's just who you are. It's your wake-up life.
Right.
And it starts to sound weird. Like, didn't I used to... They look over their shoulder and the former life is just like, it seems like somebody else. It is.
Yeah.
That's what you want for somebody. It's like there's so much waiting for them. They got to muster the courage to step over that threshold because they're deathly afraid of what happens once somebody else knows. But man, that fear drops away immediately with that first step.
Yep. I love that you said that, because I recently heard somebody say it's so huge thinking about the thoughts and all the pain and all the hurt that you've been through. But the second you start speaking about it, it starts to shrink.
Yeah.
It starts to shrink, and you realize how small it was, but how significant it was that you address it.
Mm-hmm.
You sit with it. The difference is that now the person you were then when it happened, maybe you didn't have what it took to stand up against it. Mm-hmm. But now that younger version of you has you.
Yeah.
And you're not the same person anymore. You're bigger now. You're stronger now. And so now the question is, are you going, like you said earlier, I love how you said that. Are you going to take his hand and you're going to go back and you're going to face what it was that he's been running from forever? What you've been running from forever? You've been running to things so that you can avoid that, so that you can distract yourself from that. You're going to go back and face it, because it's there where your freedom from a lot of things, your freedom to be the person, like you said, you were meant to be, your freedom to be the husband and father you were meant to be, is there. And it's there that you begin to change the generation that follows you.
That's it.
That's what it's about. I think some people care more about their generation than themselves, because they want better for their generation, but they're not doing anything about it to prepare and do the work for their generation.
Yeah.
It's more than just going out, having a job and making money and providing.
Yep. Yeah, I was kind of scared. I mean, when our executive director, Nick Liberto, approached me about the job a year and a half ago, when we started the talk, it would have been longer than that. But he asks me if I would consider. It wasn't a job offer. It was just a, would you consider it? And I was so convinced we were going to talk about something else. It took me like 10 minutes to believe that he wasn't razzing me. I was just like, come on, Nick. Like, seriously, what are we talking about today? He's like, no, seriously, I wonder if you'd like to be the director of outreach. It's like, dude, come on. 10 minutes. He's convincing me he's not messing around. And then we talked for another hour. It's like, you got to help me see this because I'm not there. And one of the questions I had for him, because he knew my story, we'd had a lot of miles with each other already. I was like, Nick, how am I going to be relevant to any of the guys I'm going to talk to? Because they're going to think, like if you haven't ever been caught up in this stuff, how are you going to relate? You don't understand. I was like, dude, I think I'm just going to be ineffective if I step into that position. And he was pretty slick. There's a reason he's the executive director. He said, well, one, I just think that's stupid. That's what are we going to try to do as a ministry? We want people to get addicted to porn first so that we can deliver them later and say that we're awesome. It's like, no, we want a whole generation of people that aren't struggling with pornography. That's what we want. And he's like, and I want more people that have your story. I want more people raising their kids like you and Adina raised your kids. That's what we want. So I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think you're being great. It convinces me so longer. There was some weeks of decision making and, making velociraptor noises at the door handle and stuff. But he was right. And it was very heartening because the first couple months, every time I would take one of those calls, I was like, oh, dude's going to ask and it's going to be a problem. And instead, they don't get depressed or disappointed or demoralized. Instead, without exception, every single time, they're like, that's awesome. I want that for my sons. And so there's no feeling of futility that they can't make that their story anymore. But they can pour themselves out to secure that future for their kids.
Yeah.
And so the metaphor we got is like right now, we've got a whole lot of Hebrews in Egypt that have only ever known slavery. When we get to do what we do, when they take the action steps, they get out of Egypt, and then they're in the wilderness. But they're going to spend the whole of their lives making sure that their progeny walk into the promised land.
Right.
And that's what we have to do. We really do. Like the mission statement of the ministry is to achieve a revival of sexual integrity throughout the entire bride of Christ. This is the slavery of our day. And so we regard it as mission critical. The church has to take sexual integrity with the utmost seriousness. And we can still accomplish it. It's going to take some dedication. There's going to be some hard scrapes to earn along the way. But it's like, are you seriously going to consign your kids to the same set of struggles? Because if you don't do anything, that is what you're doing.
For sure.
So take action. Get your story straight. You're worth it. You, in and of yourself, are worth it. But you're going to tell me your kids aren't? Like, come on. Time to man up.
And I normally condone that language right there, but I would definitely agree with that in this situation. Yeah, it's time to step up to the bat. It's time to be exactly who God called you to be. It's time for you to and I won't even say it, do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. Like you said, I love how you said that. You're worth it. Do it for yourself. And then allow them to be able to experience the fruits of your labor, what you did. That's good.
Yeah.
That's
good. I mean, it's not unlike what you see with second generation immigrants, Their parents come over from whatever country and then just work their faces off so that their kids have a better life. It's like, that's where we are.
Yeah.
Mom and dad got to work real hard to recapture sexual integrity in the home so that your kids have a better life.
That's good. Dang, brother. I'm glad we had this conversation because it's not one that I get to have often. It's, I notice a lot of men's stories run through pornography, but we don't discuss how it can run out of pornography enough. We don't discuss what's behind that. And we all recognize where it came from, where it started, but just not enough of us want to know how to put it down, but more importantly, how to get past it to say, this isn't the problem.
Mm-hmm.
This is just what I'm nursing it with.
Yeah.
So, bro, I appreciate you having this conversation with me. I appreciate what you do, what your ministry does, what what your heart, your obedience to say, yeah, this is hilarious that you guys want me, but I'm going to be obedient if God is calling me to walk through this door. And so I appreciate your obedience, brother, to step into that door and to continue to do the work that you do to help men find the freedom they want, regardless of what's brought them to your desk. Of, like you said earlier, hey, look, some men just want to come because they need to keep everything stable in the home for a little bit. But you'd be surprised sometimes it starts with that, and you realize, like, so wait, are you telling me that I can actually get past this? Like, this doesn't have to be the end of my life? Like, those guys at work, what they're saying is not true, that I'll always struggle with this? And I think that's where you start to, like, turn on light bulbs for people. So I appreciate what you're doing, man.
And once you start that, like, once that first torch is lit, it's contagious. It's catalytic.
Yeah.
You can't stop it. You know, the story I was telling about Orion, he's with people that aren't even trying to get ignited, and they're still, like, entranced by that flame.
Right.
So
you're telling me
two
it's
guys. Oh man, it's, God bless, it's so rewarding. I mean, stories we've got, it's just kind of commonplace anymore, but not in a way that's dull. You know, it's like sunrises, constellations, no matter how many times you see them, they're eternally beautiful. Like, the beauty never gets less. It's always mesmerizing. You know, you got a couple that didn't decide to get divorced, but they're just kind of like civil roommates. They got a marriage that's been sexless for 15 years. And then he goes through the workbook study in a small group. She sees the difference. And they start sharing the same bed again. That intimacy is reignited between them. Like, you got more than a decade of a sexless marriage, and now that passion is back between them. That's a resurrection story.
For sure.
And that stuff happens all the time here. All the time. I mean, I got scenes right now where it was only two guys, and that's all it takes. If you've got one battle buddy, that's sufficient. You don't have to have this 10-man group to make the work happen.
Right.
You got two guys together. That's it. You're on lock. Two guys in a big church. They go through the workbook study together. And they got so lit up that now the cascade is moving throughout the rest of the congregation. We got all kinds of programs getting ready to break loose late spring, early summer there. Two guys started it.
Right.
So the individual is worth it. You know, God would run through hell for any one of us. But man, how can you not want to be a part of the revival that is already underway? It's like, the movement is happening. This is something you want to be a part of. And it does. It gets to be fun. You know, a fellow that's caught up in the addiction, to him it might sound like a chore. But once you're in it, it's like, yeah, I kind of want to wreck some of that shop. Let's go.
Right. Yeah, no, I haven't heard, and I know a lot of brothers who are in the program, and I haven't, and the crazier part is when they get back into the program again and they go back with the other brothers and they do it alongside them. Like, okay, but you've been through it. Yeah, but I'm going with them now. And it's like, wow. That's deep. That's deep.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks to just the willingness and the understanding of how important it is to say, I came out on the other side. Now I went back and I got more, and I'm walking with them through it now. And you're right. That's when fires get started, where it's like, man, you know, what's the bear? What's the Smokey the Bear would be like? Wait a minute now.
Yeah.
like you guys are starting fires everywhere, but it's so important because it starts with one. And all it takes is one person to become on fire. I think that's a big part of my story. I came on fire, and I'm lighting everybody that I come in contact with, because I couldn't have gone through what I went through and not talk about it now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of every story, when you realize there's freedom from something that everybody told you there's no freedom from. This is just how it is. This is just how we live. This is how we get by. You realize, hey man, look, I got news. contradiction, there is freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. Oh yeah, you got to go through a lot of crap, but there's freedom though.
Yeah.
And maybe everybody won't want to go right now, but I'm coming back to see who does. And I think that's what's powerful about what your ministry does. It's lighting men on fire, and not always just through what you guys say, but through the testimony of another brother. So I appreciate, like I said, I appreciate your testimony. I appreciate the men who have come on this podcast and talked about how it was a struggle of mine. I think the last person I talked with was my brother Sean a while back ago, and he just talked about how he said, yeah, man, God set me free, but it's my job every day to stay free.
Mm-hmm.
You know, regardless of whether I went through the 12-week program or I was blessed to change how I view things and understand it. Like even in what you said earlier about how when you understand what's behind it all, I can't look at it the same anymore. Mm-hmm. So what am I going to do to make sure I don't keep looking at this or making excuses for it? So, bro, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you, man. Before we get out of here, I don't know if you're a guy with the social media presence. I know you got a book that you wrote. I would love for you to share the title of that.
Yeah, I got in a little trouble a couple of years ago. It's called When God Was a Boy. It's about Yeshua as a 13-year-old. Because, we see in scripture, we see him at 12 when he's at the temple with the sages. And then next thing you know, he's 30, beginning his ministry. I spent most of my life just entranced. Like, what happened to the childhood, young man years? Like, why didn't we get that chapter? And so the book gave me a means of giving wheels to that imagination. It's, written from the perspective of Jewish culture as they were. And so you're with the family in synagogue, you're seeing what they wear and how they pray. And then there's some misadventure stuff they get into. I can't give anybody the plot. But yeah, When God Was a Boy gives Christians a means of imagining what it might have been like. And it's told entirely from the perspective of Joseph. And so you're along for the ride with his surrogate father.
Oh, that's super cool. And that sounds a lot better than what I've always been told, which is like after 12, after he told his mom about my father's business, she slapped him into 30. So that sounds a lot better, like, because that's what my mom would have done. She'd have slapped me into my 30s. Like, what's happened?
Yeah, right.
but no, that sounds a lot better because that actually gives me something now to read instead of just being like, man, I think my mom slapped me that same way.
She slapped the Jesus into Jesus.
Yeah, right. And we straight to miracles. Like, but yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I'm definitely gonna pick up a copy because I have to add that to my library because I normally I like to have a copy of these things before I even get started into these episodes, but I knew we had something else to talk about today, so I'm excited about reading that. Maybe even talking about that later on in another episode one day with you. But well,
now I gotta send you one. I gotta put an inscription. I gotta write a pretty love note in there. It's gonna be real deal, ink on paper. You're getting special edition.
Oh, I was going to take nothing less. Don't worry. I was going to ask for that anyway. My library is not complete without autographs and books. Let's be real.
And just wait until you see how fancy I write Robert Moore the Third.
The third,
you're gonna see my grateful envy come out hard, flourishes on those Roman numerals when I drop it.
I love it. I look forward to getting that. But brother, I appreciate it. I'm gonna make sure that I put all of your information below. So for all the men who are listening and are like, okay, so how do I get a part of this? How do I become a part of this? How do I hear more about this? I'll make sure they tag it below, but please share the information with them even still, just in case they're listening on in their car through Spotify and they just need to remember it themselves.
Oh yeah. Yeah, easiest thing to do is go to provenministries.org. That landing page will catch if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're a parent, if you're a pastor, provenministries.org, and then you'll find the paths to go from there. And then if they reach out, it'll either be myself or our women's outreach coordinator, AG, will be interacting with them. We're real people here waiting to intersect with you, get you the action steps. And so you don't get plugged into an automation and then, we wish you luck. It's like, we're here waiting to respond. Yeah.
Right. Nice. And
then, they bring me on their podcast and we do this again,
Nice. I love it. Hey, look, hey, let's claim it now. Let's claim it now.
Yeah, right.
I know that's right. Let's start fires on every podcast stream. I love it.
Woo.
But no,
this
like
is so much fun. I'm so glad you brought me here.
Hey, bro, it was a pleasure. Come on. I've been looking forward to this. It was just a matter of me getting off my sabbatical to really jump back into episodes again. I mean, I have to take those every once in a while, but I recognize how important this mission is that God has called me into, to not just facilitate the conversations, but make a space where men can really talk about things, deep dive into things, to think about things, to process through things, and to hear these conversations and realize that, okay, there is hope. Okay, so I do see there's a future. There is freedom. And so that's important. That's way more important than sometimes me stopping to say, hey, look, God, this is heavy sometimes, man. Can I take a break? And God's like, I'm going to give you everything you need for the season you're in. I got you. So I appreciate you coming, man. I appreciate I look forward to having future conversations,
What are you doing tomorrow?
Yeah, it's Saturday, man. I mean, like, what you talking about, man? Look, don't tempt me with a good time. I do this regularly. The conversations I have off air are the really good ones. Those are the ones that people really miss out on, where I'm like, man, if I only had a camera right here, right now. But no, man, I look forward to talking to you soon, bro. You know,
me too, buddy.
We know how to find each other. So I'm excited about what this is going to open the door for with proven Ministries, and excited just about what God's going to continue to do through these conversations. So I want to thank everybody for listening today. I want to thank everybody for coming, and just I hope that this conversation really just open your eyes to see things, open your eyes to realize there's more, open your eyes to realize the lies that were told at one time, that this is just life, this is how it is. I hope that this just kind of gives you a glimpse into the light that's trying to shine through those cracks, as you said it from that poem, which I'm going to have to look up. That was awesome. So I thank you guys for listening. I thank everybody for joining us. And hey, we'll talk to you guys on the next episode. You guys be blessed. All right.
We appreciate you listening today and hope that if you enjoyed this episode, you'll like and subscribe, and also listen to past episodes. We hope to bring you great future content as well. Please comment your thoughts on this episode, as well as leave any prayer requests below so that this community can pray alongside you. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at God's Glory and Men's Real Stories.
Brothers, we understand how the thoughts of even facing your own past and current story and the pain and hurt that come along with this is no easy task. But you're not alone, as you hear in these episodes. Nor has God forgotten you or left your side, as He's in it with you, fighting alongside you through the storms of life. He loves and has already forgiven you, no matter what you have done, and He wants a relationship with you. Your healing, freedom, and growth are important to God, and to us as well. Maybe you're considering giving up, or need someone to talk to. Here are a few resources that already exist that we hope can shine a light into that dark place you're in. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255. If you need support but are not in crisis, consider reaching out to a warm line with individuals who would love to talk with you. Speaking to someone on these calls is typically free and confidential, and run by people who understand what it's like to struggle in life. Find a local number by going to warmline.org.